Hello, and welcome to the CivilNet podcast. I'm your host, Paul Vartan-Sukiasian. We're now on day 5 of one of the most explosive and dangerous confrontations in recent history, the conflict between Israel and Iran. It began Friday with a surprise Israeli strike that killed top Iranian leaders and nuclear scientists just days before planned nuclear talks. Iran has since retaliated and says it can't return to the table until the attacks end. But Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu shows no signs of stopping, and now President Donald Trump is suggesting the US could get involved as well. This is a deeply dangerous moment for the world, and especially relevant to us here in Armenia, where we have a front row seat and will inevitably feel its effects. To help shed light on what's happening and what it means for us, I'm joined by Middle East specialist Sergei Melkonian, a research fellow at the APRI Armenia think tank. Sergei, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
Pleasure to have you here to try and make sense of what's going on. So first up, what is the current situation within Iran? President Trump announced just a few hours ago that everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran, which, by the way, has a population of about 15 million people. This sounds very ominous.
Unfortunately, we are moving on the maybe worst case scenario now, because obviously Netanyahu's goal is to escalate in order to reach to have some achievements to reach key goals. Because, for example, according to Netanyahu's statements, there were several goals. First, to destroy the nuclear infrastructure. Second, to destroy ballistic missile infrastructure. And then we see that there is a new goal to destroy the current regime in Iran. And this is why Netanyahu needs to escalate, and the only way that's possible is to bring the United States not to defensive operations, but to the offensive one. And we have several indicators that allow us to conclude that at least there are some discussions that the US might be somehow engaged in offensive operations. First, as you mentioned, Trump's statements and the call to leave Tehran. The second, we see an increasing military presence of US in the Middle East. And it means that somehow US might be engaged not only in defensive operation, but also offensive one.
Well, you mentioned a reference to Netanyahu's goals and what they are. Someone even said that perhaps a truce is a failure for him because it seems like this is now his chance to just go all in, and there is no backing down, is there?
There is a research that was conducted by INSS, maybe one of the leading Israeli think tanks, and they found a direct correlation between the reduce of level support of Netanyahu and Netanyahu's escalation steps. For example, the new offensive in Lebanon, attacks against Houthis, attacks in Syria, etc., etc. Because obviously he failed to reach the goals in Gaza. So there were 3 several and key goals. First, to destroy Hamas military infrastructure, but we see that Hamas was able to launch 2 missiles against Israel just recently. Second, to destroy Hamas and an organization and ideology. And the third, and the key for Israeli society, to bring hostages back home. And Netanyahu was not able to fill all 3 promises for its population. And now Netanyahu set increased the bar and set a new goals that it's impossible to reach without the cooperation with the United States. And for Netanyahu is also, I think it's important to have a legacy, because Netanyahu was a Mr. Security for a long time. But since October 7, all this narrative failed, because that was maybe one of the biggest failure of Israeli intelligence and defense capabilities. And now destroying the key enemy from Israeli perspective might bring back Netanyahu to a new role, not the key failure in security, but maybe the key, again, Mr. Security back.
And so that is perhaps why he keeps escalating his plans. So yesterday, we had before some Israeli officials saying regime change is not in the cards. It's not what they're planning to do. Netanyahu now yesterday said not only may regime change be an outcome of what's going on right now, but he basically called for the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, infamously, we had the first Ayatollah Khamenei who led the revolution and was in charge for the first 10 years until his death. And now Khamenei has been in charge for all that time since. So he is really a historic figure. And so what does it mean that Israel is calling for his assassination and I presume intends to do it itself?
Yeah, we have several indicators that Israel or Netanyahu wants to have a kind of regime change in Iran. First, Israel was targeting gas and oil infrastructure that definitely will bring economic not only problems but maybe disaster in some case, and that will trigger maybe civilian unrest. Second, we see that Israel was also targeting the not military infrastructure, not nuclear infrastructure, but for example, official Iranian state radio and TV infrastructure. So these steps aim to trigger some reaction from the larger Iranian community. Why I'm talking about larger Iranian community, because we see how different opportunists try to use, for example, Azeri factor. We see how they spread within a large Azeri population in northern Iran to join Iranian military forces to deter somehow them, etc. So all countries try to, not all, but there are some countries with Israel that would like to have a weaker Iran, maybe fragmented somehow Iran, as it was in Syria, for example. And that might be the biggest achievement for Netanyahu, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, again, as Armenians, we always seem to be at the center of all these conflicts. So whether it was the war in Ukraine, in Russia, there was a lot of Armenian connection there.
Yeah.
In Israel and Jerusalem, there is an Armenian community, and there's also an Armenian community in Iran, and we are also bordering Iran. We can see it here from Yerevan. Now, what does this mean for example, the Armenian community in Tehran? Do we have any word from them? And I mean, they're being told now to evacuate as well. Will they be able to get to Armenia? I mean, what does this mean for the future of Armenians there? Because their neighborhood, from what I've heard, is one of those that is being specifically targeted by Israel and has been being bombed.
Yeah, there was a statement that the situation is under control relatively. I talked with my friends from both Iran and from Israel, from our diaspora. They told that they are safe. And both in Israel and Iran, they are not discussing, at least in their bubble, that they are going to leave or Israel or Iran. They are going to stay there. Actually, even if they want to leave from Israel, that will be much more complicated. In case of Iran, that will be much easier because we have a direct land connection, and they may use airspace because it's not possible. They may use the land connection and to come to Armenia.
So is it even relevant to talk about continued negotiations over Iran's nuclear deal? We've had a long history of this where the Obama administration was getting close, and then Netanyahu encouraged Trump when he came into office to kill it. It was killed. And then we saw with the new Trump administration, perhaps he tried to get that going again, but perhaps it's been killed again because this attack started just days before they were set to go to the table again. It doesn't that sound like Netanyahu has any interest in keeping that going. So, I mean, is this, like you said, going towards the worst case scenario, there is no more talks?
Obviously, Netanyahu is not interested in to have a deal, because he was trying to do his best to kill this deal. And all these steps and the attempts to bring the United States to some offensive operations indicate that Netanyahu will continue to use all the possible opportunities and leverage that he has. And from Iranian perspective, as I see, they do not trust in any negotiations, because Trump just stated that he was informed about Israeli preparations, that Israel is ready to attack and preparing to attack Iran. At the same time, he was conducting negotiations with Iranians and about the peace deal, even they agreed that it's not possible to have zero enrichment. Maybe they will agree, maybe 3.6%, etc. So there were some tangible negotiations. And as you mentioned, literally 2 days after the attack, the 6th meeting in Oman should take place. But obviously both Iranian officials, they do not trust in any dialogue with Trump. They do not trust, even if they reach peace deal somehow, there are zero guarantees that this peace deal will be relevant even in a short-term run. And they see that Israel is trying and continuing to escalate, because both Israel and Iran, from their perspective, this is existential threat. So this war is existential in nature, and we are in a deadlock situation. And it depends not only Iranian proposal. Maybe they will be ready somehow to come back to negotiations table. It's important somehow maybe to stop Netanyahu, because as according to different leaks, Iran is ready to come back, and the only and it will be possible only if Netanyahu stops.
Well, it reminds me of what Trump said just yesterday, that sometimes sides just need to fight it out. It seems they're at a deadlock. And yet Trump's whole thing for years was, I'm Mr. Peace. I do not get into wars. America first. And now he's basically saying, yeah, like we might get involved. And so it seems like there's a complete change. The neocons were the ones who always wanted war with Iran. And Trump has always been seen as an anti-neocon. So something seems to be changing internally. I don't know if it's just they've kind of given up and just letting Netanyahu do what he wants, but I can't really figure out that aspect of things. Do you have any comments on that? Or?
We see that Trump's approach toward Middle East was changed. For example, during his first trip to the Middle East, he didn't visit Israel. Before that, he had direct talks with Hamas and didn't engage Israel, and that was a disaster for Israel. United States launched negotiations with Iran. That was very bad for Israel. Then Trump had a deal with Mohammed bin Salman and other Persian Gulf countries without Israel. And the whole idea was to have a new Abraham Accords between Saudi Arabia and Israel to have a deal, etc. But Trump just put aside Israel and had a direct deal with Saudi Arabia. And that was a strong signal that maybe somehow U.S. policy toward Middle East is not Israeli-centric now. And you mentioned that Trump is Mr. Peace. It seems he is more Mr. Deal. If he has some good opportunity to have a deal with Iran, so that might be the only chance to stop this large-scale war.
That's right. And so what is Iran's strength level here? Israel is a much smaller country, but it has state-of-the-art weapons from the United States, for example, and it's believed to have atomic bombs as well. However, its much vaunted Iron Dome has shown it's not perfect. And Iran has implied it has bigger surprises to unleash if this war continues. What do you think about that?
No, Iran has several missiles like Haybar, and we do not have clear information did they use it or not. And Iranian key problem is that they are not able to limit Israel's air defense capabilities, because in the initial stage, Israel also targeted launch points. And if, for example, before that, Iran was able to launch at the same time maybe 100 of missiles. Now they're able to launch only dozen of missiles. And obviously that's not a big problem for Israel air defense. So Iron Dome is not the most important in this case, because they have Arrow 3 and they have THAAD with the United States. And the key goal, a key approach from Iran was to have as much as possible missiles in order to overload somehow Israeli air defense to limit their capability. So obviously they are not able to use all their capabilities if there are, for example, thousands of missiles coming, and also to increase the price. As far as the price of these missiles for air defense system are much more higher comparing with the Iranian missiles. So when we talk about qualitative and quantitative competition, so Iran was betting on the quantity one.
Well, right now, we're in Armenia, and it's cautiously watching and hoping the conflict doesn't get out of hand, though, as you say, it might be. They could easily be drawn in to this situation if this becomes a regional problem, even further than it already is. Many are saying that Azerbaijan could use this vulnerable moment to step over Iran's red line and take the Sunni corridor. Won't use the name that they use for it. Some are even calling for Azeris in North Iran, as you've talked about, to resist the government, or some even want to make Azerbaijan in northern Iran or unite with the current Azerbaijan. But let's not get too carried away, because Azerbaijan has its own security issues because of what's going on with a war right on its doorstep too. So what can Armenia do, or what might be coming for Armenia?
As soon as APRI Armenia will publish a comprehensive report on that. So we have very important challenges. in terms of both economy, security. For example, as you know, we have just 4 borders, two of them are closed. The only our gateway to the Persian Gulf and then to Indian Ocean, into wider Asian market is Iran. And as we see it, it's not operatable in that way that it was working even for 5 days ago. So, and we are limited in our economic development in this case. We have, for example, trucks close to Iranian border that are not able to cross because of the security reasons. That is the first challenge. The second challenge, as you mentioned, it's about security. Obviously, Aliyev and Erdogan may try to use this security vacuum in order to reach their goals, but maybe not only about the so-called Zangezur corridor, but also about so-called Western Azerbaijan, to make more pressure on Armenia, because as we know, Iran was maybe one of the key deterring factors since 2022, when Russia's security agreement were not reliable anymore after Azerbaijani attack against Armenia in September 2022 and Azerbaijani aggression against Artsakh in September 2023. And it depends on whether Iran will be able to keep the situation under control around its northern borders. Because from Iranian perspective, all these 2 projects, they are not aimed against Armenia. They're aimed against Iran, actually, in a long-term run, because entire northern part of Iran will be a Turkish zone of influence. And Iran, and Mr. Ali Akbar Velayati, advisor to a supreme leader, stated that Iran was able to ruin the so-called Zangezur corridor agenda.
Just days ago, they said that.
And this corridor, according to his statement, was aimed to block Iranians' opportunity to reach Europe. So for Iran, is also was having a sharing border with Armenia is also important to have a gateway towards Europe and to Russia. This is why this is not only about Armenia. In a larger perspective, it's also about Iran.
And what's interesting when it comes, you mentioned Erdogan, Pashinyan is rumored to be going to Turkey, and we just saw the deputy foreign minister in Ankara as well. And there's been, for years they've supposed to be opening the border. That still hasn't happened. This is a moment for who knows. We don't know what's going on with that. But another aspect that's very interesting in these times. So finally, what are the most likely outcomes for the future of Iran? A key part of its top leadership has already been cut off. Israel seems intent on toppling it. Where could this lead? It's
lead, according to, I mentioned in the very beginning, if we continue to move in a worst case scenario, it leads us to a more large scale war with the direct US involvement, etc. And that will be disaster for the entire Middle East and for the South Caucasus. And if Trump, because I don't know who else will be able to make pressure on Netanyahu to de-escalate. If they will be able to de-escalate, we will have temporary, not even secure environment, but temporary peace. Why temporary? Because as Israel, as Netanyahu did not achieve his goals, and in Israel next year they will have elections. For Netanyahu, it's extremely important to come back because, as we know, there are criminal cases against him. So this also is might be somehow zero-sum game for Netanyahu. This is why he is not going to de-escalate.
Well, it's a very sobering analysis that you have, but it's a very, very problematic situation that we just have to keep on watching and see how it unfolds. Thank you, Sergei, so much for joining us on the CivilNet podcast.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us.